In the ancient hills of Israel, during the days when judges ruled the land, there lived a woman whose story would become a timeless testimony of faith, promise, and the God who remembers. Her name was Hannah. Hannah was married to a man called Elkanah, a kind and devoted husband who loved her deeply. But Hannah carried a quiet sorrow, one that sat in her chest every day, one that echoed in the deepest part of her soul. She had no child. In a culture where motherhood was seen as honor, legacy, and blessing, Hannah's empty arms felt like a wound she could not hide. And though Elkanah loved her, he also had another wife, Peninnah, who did have children, many of them. And Peninnah made sure Hannah never forgot it. Peninnah mocked her, provoked her, reminded her of what she didn't have year after year. Imagine waking up every morning and hearing the children of another woman running around your home while your own prayers sounded unanswered. But Hannah did not lash out. She did not fight back. She carried her pain with dignity and poured it out before the Lord in silence. Every year, Elkanah took his family to Shiloh, where the tabernacle stood, to worship and offer sacrifices. And every year Hannah made the same painful journey, smiling on the outside, but breaking on the inside. One year, it became too much. After the sacrifice was offered, Hannah slipped away from the noise, from the laughter of children, from Peninnah's sharp words, and went to the entrance of the tabernacle. There, she fell to her knees. And the Bible says she was in bitterness of soul. It was not a gentle prayer. It was not a pretty prayer. It was a desperate, heart-cracking, tear-soaked, God, I can't hold this anymore kind of prayer. Hannah prayed, but her lips barely moved. No sound came out, only tears. And in that silent storm, she made a vow. Lord of hosts, if you will look upon my affliction and remember me, if you will give me a son, I will give him back to you all the days of his life. She wasn't bargaining. She wasn't asking for a child to prove anything to Peninnah. She just wanted to honor God with the very thing she longed for. As she prayed, the priest Eli watched her from a distance. Seeing her lips move without hearing her voice, he thought she was drunk. He approached her, perhaps sternly, and said, "How long will you be drunk? Put away your wine." But Hannah lifted her tearful face and said, "No, my lord, I am a woman of sorrowful spirit. I have been pouring out my soul before the Lord." And in that moment, Eli understood. He looked at her with compassion and said, "Go in peace, and the God of Israel grant your request." Hannah wiped her face. She stood up. Her face was no longer sad. Why? Because something shifted in her heart. She didn't yet have a child, but she had peace. She didn't yet see the miracle, but she believed the God who heard her. Time passed. And in the quiet intimacy of her marriage with Elkanah, God remembered Hannah. She conceived and gave birth to a son. A son she named Samuel, meaning, "Because I asked the Lord for him." Imagine that moment, holding in her arms what she could only hold in prayer. A promise made and a promise fulfilled. But Hannah remembered her vow. When Samuel was old enough, likely around 3 years old, she brought him back to Shiloh, not to visit, to give him back to the Lord. She held his tiny hands. She walked with him up the steps of the tabernacle, the same place her tears had once fallen on the ground. and she stood before Eli the priest and said, "I am the woman who stood here praying. This is the boy I prayed for, and the Lord granted me what I asked. So now I give him back to the Lord." It was the most beautiful act of surrender, and the most difficult. But Hannah trusted that what she placed in God's hands could never be lost. As Samuel grew up in the tabernacle, Hannah and Elkanah visited yearly, and every year she made him a small robe, a mother sewing with love, stitching prayers into every thread. And God, who never forgets faithfulness, blessed Hannah again. He gave her 3 more sons and 2 daughters. From the woman who once had nothing, God gave abundance. Samuel grew to become one of Israel's greatest prophets, the man who anointed kings, heard God's voice, and led a nation back to truth. But his story began with a woman on her knees. A woman who trusted God with her sorrow. A woman who believed that delay was not denial. A woman who discovered that tears can water the seeds of a miracle. Hannah's story teaches us this: God sees your pain. God hears your whisper. God remembers your prayer. And when He moves, He writes endings that are better than any fairy tale. If you are in a season of waiting, if you feel forgotten, if you've been mocked, overlooked, or carrying silent pain, remember Hannah. Her story is a reminder that God's timing is not slow. It is perfect. And the God who remembered Hannah will remember you.